Okay, we are starting with chapter 15 or module 15. It's about the behavior of government, how sources, various components of government spending, and the sources of state and federal tax revenue. And at the end, toward the end, we will be discussing the effects of taxes on efficiency in private or free markets. Adam Smith cited three reasons for taxation: protect the society from invasion. This has long been a problem in human civilizations. Farmers gathered together in river basins and they became very productive, and then surrounding neighbors would come and take everything they produce. So from early on, Sumerians, for instance, began to have standing armies, okay? So the necessity of national defense was recognized early on. But even today, there are countries that do not appreciate the importance of national defense, and this has become a problem in Europe. France, Italy, England, and so on, these European countries were silently watching the military build up in Germany, and they didn't do anything about it. And eventually they were invaded by the Germans, okay, at the beginning of the World War II. So national defense is very important. Second reason is protecting citizens from injustice. And the third reason for government is maintaining public institutions and public works like high interstate highways, middle schools, etc. Okay. And the key trick is how to provide the public good when when very few people are willing to pay for it. So we will be discussing about this later. Our GDP, US GDP, is about $21 trillion, right? Well, that was the case as of 2019. Then at the beginning of this year, our economy, as well as many other European neighbors, were hit by COVID virus. So this year, the projection is a substantial decline in our GDP, maybe ranging from 5 to 10%. So Europe, the United States, and other Asian nations will be suffering from a substantial decline, 10 to 20% of their GDP this year. But once COVID vaccine is distributed, I guess we would recover right away. That explains the strength of the US stock market. Okay, out of $21 trillion, government share or government spending has been over $3 trillion. So that accounts for maybe about 3.5% of our GDP, which is rather high compared to other European neighbors. Our U.S. military is the best in the world, and Russia has been competing with the United States during the post-war Cold War period, but now they gave up, although they still maintain a stockpile of nuclear heads. They have given up in military competition, right? So Russia is no longer competing with the United States, but China is. China has been spending China is probably number two. They're spending a very high fraction of their GDP on building aircraft carriers and so on, aircraft fleets. So they want to project their military power in South China Sea. Our government budget is not balanced. Our revenue has been about $3.3 trillion, about 3.5% of our GDP. Our spending is over $4 trillion. So we have roughly about $1 trillion budget deficit. That is about 5%. Our budget deficit will be about 5% of our GDP. Okay. If you compare government spending among some countries, okay, the leftmost column is that of the United States. This dark blue, dark green is Social Security, health, and health and education. This is dark green. Okay, this is light green. And you will see defense spending, this red brick color. Okay, that's defense spending. So we are paying, we're spending about 660 billion dollars on national defense. Compared to the US, China is spending $220 billion, 1/3 of what we would spend on national defense. Russia is distant third. They are spending only about $70 billion. Their income, actually their GDP is about the same as that of South Korea with much smaller population. So Russia is not a problem, but China is. For the next couple of decades, they will be fiercely competing with the United States. And as their military power and economic power go up, they are going to have a more say in South China Sea and elsewhere. Already there has been a lot of territorial disputes in South China Sea, like Paracel Islands and Spratly Islands, etc. Okay. Now look at European countries. Here we only show Germany. Their spending is very small. Military spending is very small. They have become a free rider since U.S. is sending our troops and provide national defense so that Russians cannot attack Germany. They are spending very little on national defense, and they were able to devote higher fraction of their GDP on investment, uh, business expansion, etc. So Germany was able to grow very, very fast. Uh, and in the last meeting with NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization or something like that, we have been asking the European countries to spend 2% of their GDP on national defense. Germany has been neglecting it, okay? And actually they try to develop trade relations with Russia. They are importing Russian gas, natural gas, etc. So I wonder whether there is any need for maintaining NATO, maybe for the time being, but eventually we may have to let them go develop their own national defense, let them defend these countries by themselves, for themselves. Okay, revenue sources. The lion's share come from income and profit tax, consumer income or individual income taxes, and corporate profit tax. PI stands for profit here. Okay, in other countries, the composition may be different. Because the United States is a federation of 50 states, there are state and local governments, like state of Iowa, city of Ames, etc. They also need to maintain public highways. They need to maintain water and sewage systems, etc. So they have to generate some revenues. Much of it comes from property taxes. So all citizens of Ames, if they have their own houses, they have to pay taxes ranging probably $3,000 a year or so for each house, and that is just a very important source of the municipal government. Sales tax is also widely used in many cities and local governments, usually on vice, like cigarettes, liquor, uh, because demand for these products are very price inelastic, okay? Elasticity is close to zero. Whether you hit them with a $10 tax or not, their behavior doesn't change very much. So such products with low price elasticity of demand is a good candidate for state and local taxes. Individual income tax is also an important source of state and local government. There are several types of taxes. Personal income tax is a major one. Also, personal income tax is used for buying private goods by the government. Social Security, this is an income redistribution, okay? So you cannot collect Social Security taxes from individuals and then use that to buy, to build highways and to build high schools. No, you cannot do that, okay? These are for old people, they don't plan ahead for old age. So even with Social Security payments, there are a lot of homeless people in the streets of San Francisco and New York City. And Medicare is uh, hospital expenses, okay? These are Social Security taxes, Medicare taxes. These are basically designed to redistribute income from the rich to the poor, or from the poor to the rich. I don't know which way it is. But on the whole, redistribution is from the rich to the poor, okay? And then there are taxes paid by corporations, business firms, etc. And then even though there is no economic transactions, there are property taxes. You own properties, this is sort of a wealth tax. If you're poor, obviously you don't pay. You won't have properties. But if you do, property tax is a major source of state, schools, uh, highways, etc. Corporate income tax is a major source of uh, federal and state government. And then there are capital gains tax. If you buy a house, then sell it. If you buy a house for 100,000 and then later sell it when the price went up to $200,000, you have $100,000 capital gains, and that capital gains will be subject to capital gains tax. Okay, so this is a source of revenue, but this type of transactions does not happen frequently. Maybe once in a lifetime, once in 3 or 4 decades. People move to another place. Well, Americans move on average once every 7 years. So each time they will be paying capital gains tax. Uh, Major source of taxes, income taxes assessed on wages and salaries of workers, okay? And then their health benefits, health insurance, and pensions, they're also subject to income tax. If you set up a corporation, even husband and wife could set up a corporation, they will be paying tax twice. When the corporation makes profits, those profits are subject to tax. And then after you receive profits from the corporations, your income would be subject to individual income tax again, okay? So in theory, you are paying tax twice, but there is a major advantage of corporations. When the firm is going out of business, your creditors will not go after your properties. Uh, the houses you live in would be exempt from uh, collection. Okay, proprietor's income, this is like a single man or a single person is having a business, uh, carpenter business or roofing business, whatever. Uh, Proprietor's income is subject to profit tax. Okay, so how is U.S. income tax is charged? Well, our system is so-called progressive. Marginal tax rate goes up, marginal tax rate goes up as income goes up. So when income is very low, say up to $9,525, your tax will be 10% only. But if your income is higher, up to
It's nice to
38,700.
have stuff like your own. Like you'll get it yourself because it's like rely on everybody else to wait when they want to get it, when they can get it.
Yeah.
You get it yourself. You do it on your own time.
I need to mute.
Yo, Hannah, mute yourself. Thank you.
So when your income reaches up to $38,000, for the increment, you are paying 12% tax and so on. If your income rises up to $82,500, for this increment, you are paying 22%, etc. So to illustrate, let's use this line as the vertical axis, measuring tax, and the horizontal, this line as horizontal axis representing income. Your tax will be 10% at first, then 12%, then 22%, then 24%, and you get the idea. This tax rate is going up and it is becoming ever steeper. In each bracket, it becomes steeper and steeper, okay? So the highest tax rate is 30% in the United States. This is probably acceptable to most Americans, but in France, some around 2012, French people raised this tax rate, marginal tax rate, to 75%. For 1 million euro owners or more, okay? So many French people, rich French people, migrated to other countries. And Russian President Vladimir Putin said, please come over to Moscow. We'll give you Russian citizenship right away. So many people left the country of France, and after experimenting with this high marginal tax rate of €1 million or more earners, because of this migration of these rich people, the French government collected very little tax in effect. So after experimenting with this high marginal tax rate, they rescinded this in 2015. That's what I hear. So the idea is okay, but what the marginal tax rate should be, this is a normative question. There is no right or wrong here. If you raise it too much, investors leave the country, and then there goes all these jobs to foreign countries. So in the United States, we are comparing income tax rate, right, with corporate tax rate. In the US, corporate tax rate has been 40% for many years. And then we noticed that we are losing lots of businesses. American multinational firms are leaving the country. They are building factories in China, everywhere, in Asia, Bangladesh, India, and so on. And so all these blue-collar workers' jobs were leaving the country as these multinationals, US multinationals, were outsourcing American jobs. So President Trump is trying to reverse this. He's trying to give tax incentives to the returning American firms. Next, Social Security tax. This is not the so-called government spending. This is just a redistribution of income. So if you imagine a representative American, then we take some tax out of one pocket and give it and put it back into the right pocket. Okay, that's not government spending. Of course, it is government spending, but that's not the government purchases of privately produced outputs. Okay, when we calculate GDP, so Social Security tax is taken from one person and then given to another American, okay? And that's Social Security tax is 6.2% of the first $128,400. That's for old age. And then if you are hospitalized, 1.45% of income up to $200,000, it will be collected for your hospital insurance, okay, so-called Medicare. And both are paid by employees. 50% is paid by employees. The other 50% by the employers, okay? And the base amount of $128,400 and $200,000, these are indexed. So inflation rate changes every year. They are going to modify these two amounts, okay? State and local taxes, well, this differs among states depending on the needs. Texas has a huge oil revenue. When I lived there many years ago, state, because they had such a high oil revenue, they didn't charge any state tax. State tax was zero many years ago, but now it must have gone up quite a bit, up to 8%. Iowa is much less. Okay, capital gains taxes are imposed on the profits when selling properties, okay? Selling price minus purchase price, that's difference is capital gains, and you will be subject to capital gains tax for that. Okay, next. As I said, there are four sectors of the US economy. The household sector basically consumes. So C stands for consumption of domestically produced goods. When you go to Walmart and buy Walmart products, 80% of these Walmart products are made in China, so they are not counted as consumption, but imports, okay? Business sector, all these firms, millions of firms, 20-some millions of firms, American firms, hire workers, buy inputs, and sell them to consumers, and they contribute, they make business investments. And the government sector basically collects taxes, as I said before, and they also buy goods from the private sector. That's called government spending, okay? If the British government purchases Chinese railway, that's an import, that's not UK produced products. So we are talking about government spending, government purchases of domestically produced goods, okay? When G government spending equals tax revenue are equal. When these two are equal, we have a balanced budget, okay? But in the 1930s, after the Great Depression, Keynesian deficit financing was very popular. So many, which basically says that during recession, the government should should have budget deficit, create lots of public projects, build highways, etc., thereby stimulating the U.S. economy. Okay, that idea was very popular, and that was adopted by many economic teams of Europe and Japan and so on. But then they forgot about the other half of the advice, which was, well, during boom period, you should collect more tax than you spend. Tax revenue should be greater than government spending. So over the long haul, you should have balanced budget. Most of these governments, policymakers ignore this half of Keynes' advice. Okay, so the U.S. government purchases products from the U.S. private sector. Okay, so in 2018, our government spending, okay, this government spending is different from one of the components of U.S. GDP, because this government spending, I should call it G prime, meaning government spending plus redistribution of income on the poor people. That was $4.47 trillion. Our tax revenue was $3.47 trillion. So in 2018, exactly, the United States has exactly $1 trillion budget deficit, okay? That's going to be a problem. But compared to other countries, our budget deficit is much smaller. Only $1 trillion out of $4 trillion spending, okay? In other countries, the cumulative deficit, budget deficit is much higher, like in Japan. Japan's GDP, Japan's public debt to GDP ratio is over 250%. And I think China is going up there. So compared to other European economies, US, sure, we have budget deficits, but we are in much better shape than European countries. And the third goal of the government is redistributing income. There is no effect on US GDP in the short run. Instead of redistributing income, if the government purchases, hires people, undertake public projects, that would raise US GDP, but not redistribution of income, okay? So income redistribution is supposed to be from the rich to the poor. So I have a typo here, I noted it here. Not from the poor to the rich, but from the rich to the poor. Okay, that is the idea. We don't want these poor people to overthrow the government, which is what happened after World War I. Poor Russian farmers realized that their enemies are not the German soldiers, but Romanov family, who didn't really care about the poor Russian farmers. And that caused revolution in February, and also another in October 1917. Okay, so this poverty of Russian farmers stimulated, produced two revolutions, once in February and the second time in October by Vladimir Lenin. Okay, so here is the circular flow. Government spending is about $3 or $4 trillion. Household sector spends goods, buys domestically produced goods. This is about 2/3 of US income is spent by the household. Business firms make investment. Banking sector, well, this can be combined in the business sector. And here is a source of business fluctuations. This watermark indicates fluctuations. This is the source of business fluctuations. Sometimes, yeah, let's invest. During SARS, rampant SARS crisis in 2003, very few firms invested in developing SARS vaccine because there were not that many customers, only about a little less than 10,000 people developed this SARS virus, and you cannot make money making vaccines if you sell only 10,000 doses, you are guaranteed to lose money. So no firms developed SARS vaccine in 2003. Now that this COVID virus is rampant throughout the world, including Australia and New Zealand and so on and so on, Russia, China, many, about 5 vaccine companies are planning to produce billions of vaccines, COVID vaccines. So this time I'm sure they will make money and will not regret. But until they develop, until they go through, until they present scientific proof, scientific evidences of sound and reliable COVID vaccines, we should be very careful not to waste money. Russian President Vladimir Putin says one of her daughters received Russian vaccine, but he didn't say all my daughters. If he really trusted the Russia-produced vaccines, everybody would be taking Russian vaccines. He himself did not take it either. So we have to be very careful with these public projects. Okay. Okay, now let's briefly discuss one more topic. Why developing countries are poor? Well, among others, they don't have the infrastructure like highways. They don't have clean water system. They don't have healthy labor force. They don't have the medical service, healthcare services like the United States. Well, we also have a problem, right? Hospital expenses of COVID virus patient in the United States, we were told cost about $30,000 for staying in the hospital for 2 weeks, right? That's the quarantine period. $30,000. That's the cost of treatment. Whereas in South Korea, I was told it's only about $300, but 80% of that is covered by the government, and the remainder is paid by the patients. So it's like a matter of, it's like $50 in South Korea. So somewhere between these two countries in the United States, somebody's making huge amount of money, okay? So we need to find the source of inefficiency in the future and figure out how some other countries can do this at much less cost. So in developing countries, the infrastructure is not there. Lack of infrastructure is a problem in many developing countries. Infrastructure is like a public capital. So the more infrastructure you have, the less private sectors will pay to do economic activities. So in order to compete with modern nations, developing countries must have healthy working labor force, healthy working population. They must have clean water. This is a problem in many African countries. They need to have suitable housings for these workers, building huts, stone huts, wooden huts, and filling them with many workers, with no schools and highways. Well, if you don't build highways, how can you take your products to the marketplace? Like in some Latin American countries, if you want to go to market, there is no highway. You have to take the boat and go to the marketplace. Lack of good highways increase transportation costs and sometimes make it even impossible to deliver your products to the marketplace. Okay, so here is another good example of infrastructure. Romans built aqueduct. They didn't intend this. They were not well-meaning people. They conquered many countries in the Mediterranean world, and they want to squash rebellion right away instead of letting it develop like Spartacus. If there is a rebellion, you need to send your troops right away, and that is the reason why they built Roman roads. So it is said all roads lead to Rome, and that they really meant it literally. So during the 300-year period before Julius Caesar, these these Romans built highways of about 56,000 miles, including via Appia, via Ignatia, and so on. And you compare these Roman highways, they built it very well. Maybe later on I will show you pictures of surviving Roman highways, Roman roads. And compared to the Romans, US government during Eisenhower administration built about 43,000 miles of interstate highway in the 1950s during Eisenhower administration. And that stimulated US economy quite a bit. And US economy was growing at a sustained high rates since then. So even today, if you happen to visit Rome and other places, you can drink this Roman water instead of paying 5 euro or 5 euros for Coca-Cola in the streets in front of Palatine Hill or elsewhere. That would be 4 euro or 5 euro. That's about $5 or $6 for one can of Coca-Cola. And you can instead drink this water free of charge. And that is best tap water ever. Clean drinking water was available to these Romans. And that explains why Roman government developed. Roman government was far more advanced than any European governments in those days. And that is the basis of European civilization, built on Greco-Roman tradition, Roman laws, Roman highways, Roman aqueduct, and so on. And without these public goods, Rome would not have had such a great impact on the European civilization. Here is a picture of an African boy. Wow, it's rain. Wait, water is coming. No, he's shouting. I don't want to dampen his pleasure and joy of touching rainwater. But these African people could not invest enough in public goods, infrastructure. So they gather in this small small reservoir in Senegal to collect water, okay? Otherwise, if you live in a faraway corner, you'll have to drink dirty, stagnant water and then loaded with malaria eggs and so on. Very dangerous. You cannot, without public investment in public infrastructure, you cannot maintain safe water, safe drinking water. This still is a problem in the African continent. Okay, we'll stop here. Any questions? Now you can unmute your microphone and ask questions. If not, we will stop here. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.